BP has finally apologised to the victims of the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico and agreed to a $20 billion compensation fund. The deal was worked out at the White House between President Barack Obama and BP executives, but the CEO of BP is being warned he will be sliced and diced when he faces the US Congress later tonight. Now, joining me in the studio to discuss this is the CEO of the US Studies Centre at Sydney University, Geoff Garrett. Well, Professor Garrett, thank you for coming in. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
This is quite a battle between BP and President Barack Obama. How's that battle going?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. People are talking about precedents, and the two that are out there at the moment is this Obama's Hurricane Katrina, a disaster for the Gulf, a disaster for the president. Obama, some of Obama's supporters want to say it could be his 9/11. It's a disaster that will rally the country behind him. But I actually think at the moment it's looking more like the Lehman Brothers crash and the global financial crisis. So the Obama script today is blame the greedy capitalists, say that the administrations before you had too lax legislation, so you've got to fix it up, and then use that to try to breathe some life into your own agenda, in this case Obama's ambitious energy and climate change legislation.
Given, when you talk about it or compare it to what Hurricane Katrina was to Bush, that was such an immediate disaster with so many people in such need at that time. This is a disaster that the victims are going to be, or the troubles that they have will be spread out over a long period of time. Do you think Obama is dealing with it in a way that is not going to come back on him?
Well, that's really an interesting question. So what could the president actually do? The president doesn't have the technology to put a cap on the oil spill. So it's dealing with the fallout, obviously. Part of that is managing the fallout on the Gulf, but part of it is also the political fallout. And I think the critics of Obama say, you know, this is a metaphor for the presidency. Here's a guy who talks a very good game, but when it comes to action, he can't deliver. So what he's trying to do now is saying, I'm a tough man. I am going to deliver. I'm going to beat up BP, as Congress will as well. I'm going to change legislation, and I'm going to wean us off fossil fuels. So he's trying to get on the front foot before this sort of drip, 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 if you pardon the pun, overwhelms his presidency.
Do you think he is enjoying political advantage from this at the moment, or is it hurting him?
Well, an interesting thing happened about 2 weeks ago. I think for about the first month of the spill, Obama wasn't tarred with the brush. Then all of a sudden, the elite opinion descended on him. It's now his problem. So he's had to react, which is why he took this very unusual step of a big set-piece, nationally televised Oval Office speech, which was all about responding to the spill, both in the short term and in the longer term.
How significant do you think it was that it was his first live Oval Office address?
It makes it really pretty big, and I think that makes these comparisons to Katrina or 9/11 or to the financial crisis the right ones. It's potentially something that could be a pivot point in the presidency. Either it could condemn Obama to being a really weak president, or he could rise from this. And he raised the stakes himself, I think, personally this week by saying, "Listen, I'm going to take charge, and I'm going to do these things in the short term, and I'm going to change the country in the long term to wean us off fossil fuels." So a pretty big week, I think, for the president.
What's it going to mean for coastal oil exploration in the US?
Well, that's a tough one, isn't it? Because on the one, I mean, this is a sort of flip-flop for Obama. Obama was prepared to say, listen, we should do offshore oil drilling in the US as a compromise to get his climate and energy legislation through. Then the spill happens, and he has to say, we've got to put an immediate moratorium on offshore drilling. But then the Gulf Coast community says, listen, this is where our jobs come from, so don't be so quick to cut off our employment options. So there aren't any easy fixes for Obama, but I think what he did was to get on the front foot and say, listen, I'm in charge, and here's my agenda, and here's how I'm going to do it.
And all the while, oil continues to pour into the Gulf of Mexico.
At what are the estimates now? About every 3 to 5 days, it's as big as the entire Exxon Valdez spill, the largest spill in history before this one.
Unbelievable. Professor Geoff Garrett, we appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.